You can be using the best training board in the world and still fail to see results if your approach is haphazard. And the wild thing is, most of the board climbing mistakes that I fix as a coach aren't some advanced secret techniques. They're mostly just small habits that you could apply to your climbing in a single afternoon. Even if you only apply one of these tips from today, you'll still notice a difference in the quality of your sessions. This is the Advanced Climbing series. I'm Nate Drolet, and today I'll be walking you through 9 ways to level up your board climbing. If this is your first time joining this series, so far we're about 90 points into this Advanced Climbing series, so when I start by saying number 1 is number 93, that's why. You don't need to jump all the way back to the start to be able to understand what I'm saying today, but if you do want to watch all of these, they are all saved in an Advanced Climbing playlist. Number 93, set an intention for your board climbing session. This is probably the fastest way to get higher quality sessions. A lot of us hear that board climbing will make us stronger and better, so we say, okay, I'm going to go climb on a board. But you don't want to just have a normal, have fun, hang out session where you do whatever, but on a board. You'll still get some good results from that. It's better than nothing, but we can have so much higher quality by having an intention for our session. Your intention can range everywhere from you're going to be projecting, you're going to be doing hard circuiting, maybe you're going to climb a bunch of volume, or it might just be you're going to hang out with friends and have a fun time. Those are all great answers, but it's important to know what you're doing because that will dictate how much you're going to warm up, how much you're going to rest between attempts, how long you're going to let your session go on for, all of these things. One of the most common ways I see people sabotage their board sessions is they start off aimless. They're going to kind of warm up, do whatever, maybe light up some different boulders. They just kind of mess around until they feel like, okay, I guess I'll start trying my project or to do repeats or whatever it is. But if you don't have that intention of, hey, I'm going to just warm up effectively, and once I'm ready, I'm going to move now to trying hard problems, we end up just wasting a lot of energy in that early part of our session, and the high quality part of our session we're just too tired for to get the most out of. The last reason why you want to set an intention for your session before you go in is that we need to know how long this session is going to be and when you're going to end it. A really important part of board climbing is being able to show up fresh and give great efforts. And showing up fresh also means that you need to end your sessions appropriately. It's super fun to have these really long hero sessions where you climb for 3 to 4 hours and you end just completely wrecked. But that often means that you're not going to have another high quality session for maybe another week, maybe longer, depending on how old you are and how fast you recover. If you want high quality sessions consistently, we need to know how long these sessions are going to be for. So if you're projecting, you might want to end the session the second you start realizing you're powering down. So you're no longer feeling snappy and powerful. Cool, session's done. If you're doing repeats, we want to have a cutoff of how many times are we going to pull onto the wall and give great attempts. From there, if I'm going to give 20 good efforts, 20 is my cutoff. Now, if you're going to be doing endurance or power endurance work, yeah, fatigue is part of the game. You're going to be feeling kind of tired. But that doesn't mean we're going to train until we're just a puddle on the ground. You still need a cutoff. You'll hear coaches talk all the time about how important recovery is and things like sleep and nutrition. But recovery starts with ending your session appropriately. Because you can have amazing sleep, you can be nailing down your nutrition and all the other things, but if you're just driving yourself into the ground every single session, it doesn't matter how good your recovery protocols are, you're just digging yourself out of such a deep hole, where if we end our sessions at a good time, we can keep coming back time after time and have a lot of really high quality training days. Number 94, make lists. This one is so important. Board climbing's amazing, and the apps and the communities around them are so fun and fantastic. It's incredible. I can open up the Moon Climbing app and I can have 40,000 boulders to choose from, but obviously that comes with its own issue. If my sessions are me just going through and swiping through problems, looking up until I see something that looks good to me, and I only climb on that all the time, I'm going to be pigeonholing myself into certain styles. I'm only going to be climbing on things that look fun, that look like my style, even if I don't realize that it's my style. I'm probably going to be avoiding things that I really need to work on. And a good way to avoid this is by making lists. All of the apps have a system to where you can create folders. Man, I make folders for everything. Heel hook boulders, power boulders, well set small feet, projects. If someone is climbing on a boulder and they're stronger than me and I think, wow, that looks really cool, it's too hard for me to try today, I'll ask them what it is and then I'm going to save it into a folder for these are boulders to try in the future. Having curated lists of things to try is so valuable. And what this also does is when you are having a normal climbing session, let's say you're just having fun with friends, let's say you climb something and you think, wow, that really isolated a weakness of mine. That felt super, super challenging and was just the perfect boulder for me. Amazing, save it. That is a boulder you want to repeat every single time you come into the gym and train in that way. If it's a powerful boulder, anytime you're doing a powerful session, yeah, let's light that up at the end of the warm-up. Let's run it for a repeat. Saving these things and getting as much value out of them, squeezing all of the juice we can out of these is so important. I first started board climbing back in 2012, 2013 on a moonboard, and this was before LEDs existed. And the way it worked was you would go print out a boulder problem. So you would pull up the website and each page was its own individual boulder, and you would print out a bunch, put it in the 3-ring binder, and that lived at the base of a board. Now, the moonboard I climbed on had maybe 75 boulders in its binder. Probably 15 of them were way too hard for me at the time, and probably 20 of them were either warm-ups or things I just did very quickly. This means that there were only 40 problems for me in this binder that range from, yeah, this is hard, but I could probably do it with a little bit of work, to this is hard and it will take me a lot of work. What was so great about only having 40 problems to choose from is I was more likely to get back to the things that were hard for me. I wasn't going to try something being like, oh, I don't know, it's challenging. Maybe I'll come back to it and skip it because there's 20,000 other things to do. And it also reduced decision fatigue. I didn't need to bounce around trying to find the perfect thing because there wasn't much to choose from. If I was trying to look for a boulder that would take me 3 to 5 sessions to send, maybe only like 8 of those existed in this binder. I didn't really have to work that hard to choose what I was going to do. And by only having 8 problems to really choose from, I could stop and say, all right, which one should I actually be on? What is the best for my goals? Where when you have an near infinite number of problems to choose from, it's so easy to hem and haw and say, well, this isn't perfect. This seems more fun, or I want to do this better. Or you just keep hunting for the perfect problem that may or may not exist. So my recommendation is start making lists for everything. If you have a good warm-up circuit, cool-down circuit, powerful climbing, something that stresses your weaknesses, whatever it is. And the more you do this, the more you'll start recognizing that boulders are good for different things. I'll do a boulder and I'll think, wow, that would be perfect for 4x4s. Goes to the 4x4 list. Having tens of thousands of problems to choose from is really cool, but it can easily become more of a burden than it is a benefit. Number 95, long-term measuring and benchmarking. This is something that a lot of you might already do intuitively, but I'm going to push you to make it a habit. Long-term measuring and benchmarking. What do I mean by that? What I mean is these boards don't change. I have been climbing on a 2016 moonboard since 2016, almost 10 years now. Over those 10 years, I have tried many of these boulders over and over again. I can have these different benchmarks for how I'm feeling. And this can range in difficulty from hard project level climbs to where, maybe one year you try them and you can barely pull off the ground. You can't even imagine doing the moves. But next year you can, pull on, kind of hold the position and start to generate for the next move. And that's great. This is a good sign of progress. The reason why long-term measuring and benchmarks using boulder problems specifically is so valuable is because it's climbing. Measuring your hangboard numbers, your pull-ups, all that, there's value there. But the end goal is, are you getting better at climbing? That's my end goal. I want to know, am I improving at climbing? And a great way to test that is with climbing. Boards can be really nice for this. A lot of people do it on their own outdoors because they'll climb on things year after year because rocks don't change for the most part, but conditions make a big difference. So you can't test this in the summer the way you might test it in the winter, where a board in an air-conditioned, hopefully, gym means that you can try the same boulder in March that you tried in August, and hopefully they should be somewhat similar. The way that I recommend people pick out their benchmarks / measuring sticks is plan on picking out a mix of problems across a spread of difficulties. So I do think there is value in picking problems you've done before and kind of checking in every few months and saying, yeah, how does this feel? Do I feel good, better on this, worse on this? It could be jumping between crimps, hard static lock-offs, heel hooks, whatever it is. Having a mix of styles, and preferably styles that are relevant to your goals, is really useful. Beyond having things that you have done before, I also really like picking problems that will just be benchmark problems. So you will go in and try them maybe only every couple of months, and you're not going to project them or try them in between that because we don't want to spoil the test. If we pick a problem to try that's big jumps between crimps, and then you go and you just project that for 3 months and send it, yes, you probably got better at jumping between crimps, but you also got better at this problem itself, so we lose it as a measuring stick. What I would rather have is we pick this problem that's representative of a style, and then you can go train in other ways for that. And that can tell you, is this other way of training making you better at this style? Because let's say it is jumping between crimps and you decide, okay, I want to go do some campus boarding. You do that for 2 months, come back. How are you at jumping between crimps now? Better, worse, same? Maybe you just go climb on jump between crimps outdoors. How does that carry over? Do you feel like, maybe you're not as powerful as when you just board climb, but maybe you're feeling more precise or just more connected through your legs when you jump? Who knows? But having these long-term measurements is so helpful because a board doesn't change. I want to know 10 years from now, how much better am I compared to 2025 Nathan versus 2016 Nathan? Having a board I've been able to use as a reference board this entire time is fantastic. Now, you don't have to use your main board that you train on for this. I personally don't train on the 2016 moon board anymore. I find it very crimpy and it's a little aggressive on the fingers. I find that I have to be a little too cautious with my volume when I climb on it to make sure I don't tweak a finger, where I don't have to do that on other boards. The 2016 moon board is the board I've climbed on more than all other boards combined. For me now, it is purely a benchmarking board. I come back to it every couple of months. I'll have 2 or 3 sessions just to see how do I feel at this style and on these climbs, and then I go back and I train elsewhere. You can retest your benchmarks anytime across the year, and I think there's a lot of value in that. If you're someone who does a lot of sport climbing, let's say you have a long fall season of sport climbing just on big endurance sport climbs, it's useful to come back and test on your benchmarks after the season and see how much power have you lost, how much strength have you lost by doing big endurance sport climbs. And that's okay that you lose power and strength. That happens to everyone. That's the trade-off for doing big endurance sport climbs. But what's really cool about this is that if this year, let's say you drop 3 V grades over the course of a season, that feels like a lot of power loss. Maybe I don't want to lose quite as much. Next year, let's just do a little bit more bouldering throughout the sport season and see, can I only drop 2 grades? Can I only drop 1 grade? Let's say you decide I don't want to lose any power, any strength through my sport climbing. So you have your metrics, you end the season, and you didn't lose any power. Amazing. But now we also need to look, how's your performance? Because if you didn't perform any better on sport climbs, which might happen because this natural trade-off that often happens, now we have to say, okay, cool. My tests went really well, but my performance didn't. Being able to have this as a tool, but just that, a tool, not an end goal in itself, I think is really valuable. Number 96, the high risk, high reward myth. People often say in climbing that You need to push towards the edge of injury, of almost getting injured to really progress. And I'm here to tell you that you as an advanced climber, let's say someone climbing even up to, frankly, V12, V13, that's not the case. Not by a long shot. Even just the idea of risk versus reward, a lot of people will say high risk, high reward. That's not a truism. There are so many things that are just high risk with no extra benefit. And pushing yourself to the edge of injury is one of those things. A phrase I often hear people say, and especially when it comes to board climbing, is, I want to see how much training I can do without getting hurt. Not getting hurt is not a goal. That's a terrible goal. Your goal should be, how do I do enough to see progress? And there is an enormous gulf between doing enough to see progress and doing so much that you get injured. Finding that right balance starts with changing your mindset on how you see risk versus reward. You know, a good and bad thing about climbing is that everything funnels through our hands. And what this means is if your hands get stronger, man, it gets you better at climbing at a lot of different styles because our hands are so relevant. But what this also means is if you pick up a finger injury, you are so dramatically limited in what you can do to improve at climbing. Constantly towing that line of will I, won't I get a finger injury by how much training I'm doing isn't worth it. Taking 3 months to recover from a pulley injury or longer from a knuckle injury is not worth it. The minimal amounts of benefit you get from going from training at a sufficient level to training at a breakneck level to where you might get hurt, that little gain, it cannot make up for having to rehab for 3 months. And especially a lot of you out there pick up 1 or 2 finger injuries every single year. You know, many years ago, there was a climber in Colorado who he was plateaued at about the V10 level for quite a while. And then 1 year out of nowhere, he just started seeing this great progress, started climbing V11s, then V12s, then V13, and got to, I believe, even V14. And all in a very short period of time after having had a very long plateau at V10. And in an interview, when he was asked, what was the difference? What spurred this long plateau to finally stop? He said, every year I would get 1 or 2 pulley injuries, just like clockwork. I would climb a bunch, I would train, get an injury, have to take all this time to recover, and then I'd ramp back up, feel good, get an injury again. And then finally, I just stopped getting hurt. And when he stopped getting his annual pulley injuries, he started seeing dramatic progress year after year. I know you want progress right now. I know you want to send harder today, but pushing yourself to the edge of injury is not the way. If you catch yourself thinking, oh God, I hope I don't get hurt if I try this, or I just want to do as much as I can without getting injured, you're going too far. We need to pull it back because that is not needed. Another thing that's really cool about rock climbing is that it's so multifaceted that there are 100 ways you can improve. Even if you are a V13 climber, I can guarantee there are a dozen things you can do. And if we look at these, they're not all going to be as inherently risky as the others. So let's say your mental game, your technical game, your tactical game, improving your mobility. These are all really safe things to do. Even a lot of physical training is incredibly safe. You know, let's say 11 of the 12 things are very safe. We can sink a ton of time and energy into those. And then let's say you do want to improve at fist crimping on really tiny crimps. Okay, this does have a little more inherent risk to it than wanting to get better at heel hooking. So we're going to just pay closer attention to this. We don't need to think about this whole plan as being risky. It's just this one little aspect. And if you can zero in and pay attention to that and say, all right, this is the one thing that is a little risky. How do we be smart about it? How do I track my progress to make sure what I'm doing is enough to see improvement consistently, but not so much that I'm really risking injury? And to finish up with this point, minor tweaks and twinges will happen. Rocks aren't built for us. We're just trying to make our way up them. We put our body in weird positions, and high-level sport is not healthy. Being athletic and being healthy are different things. So yes, you're going to pick up little tweaks, little twinges, like you might have a sore shoulder that you need to be smart with for a couple weeks, or You might have a little hamstring strain from too much heel hooking. Little stuff like this will happen. And we're not machines. We can't have perfect inputs to get perfect outputs and never have any sort of tweak or twinge. But if you are regularly having season-ending injuries, especially with your fingers, because this is where most people end up dealing with these things, we need to reevaluate. Because there's a big difference between, I need to avoid cast-ons for like 2 weeks just to get my shoulder feeling good, and my next 3 months are laid out because I need to rehab this pulley. Number 97. The angle of your board matters. Let me start by saying that if you climb on a fixed angle board, well, this is good information. It's not going to completely apply to you, but a lot of people have adjustable boards now, and I see a very common trend, and that is people tend to think steeper is better. Often we're told climbing on a steep board is what's going to make you stronger and more powerful, but this isn't necessarily true. In a way it is, but it's true in the same way as thinking lifting heavy weights will make you much stronger. But if you've never lifted weights before, trying to bench press 315 on your first day isn't going to end well. You're just going to get stapled into the bench. Instead, you need to find what is heavy for you in the terms of bench press. So with a board, what that means is we need to find what is steep for you. We still want to be able to do big, powerful moves. You want to be able to cover a lot of distance fast, be able to move through a big range of motion through your shoulders and through your hips. If we go so steep that you're not strong enough to bend your arms and everything you do is just kind of straight arm dangle climbing, that's not making you more powerful. Now, it is a skill and it's getting you better at climbing on steep stuff. So if your goal purely is, I want to climb at 70 degrees because I have a boulder project that is 70 degrees, amazing. Yeah, train for the test. That's going to do it. But if your goal is to get more powerful, think about changing the angle of a wall the same way as increasing or decreasing the amount of weight you're using when lifting weights. Because as we do go more vertical, more weight goes onto our feet and less is on our hands and our arms. That allows us to really meet ourselves where we are at. Another thing that's important for this is thinking about your hands. If you want to get stronger at a specific grip, let's say you want to get really strong at small crimps. Who doesn't? You should be climbing on lower angled walls unless you're very, very strong already. The reason for this is that if you aren't strong enough to hold a grip in a strict crimp or half crimp position, if you're climbing on a TB2 and it's 45 degrees overhanging, you're hitting these crimps and your hands are just buckling open and you're kind of claw dragging your way through, and you can only hold them if you're on a jug foot or your other hand's a jug. You're just not getting that much quality time in this grip position where, hey, if we just let our ego take a hit, crank that board up to 25 degrees, and then you can actually hold these crimps. You can move on them. You can get a sufficient amount of volume without your hands feeling like they're going to be prying open and putting you into a compromised position. This is going to give you much better returns. When we're considering angle, it's also important to think about what are your goals. If you're a sport climber, a lot of sport climbing isn't that steep, unfortunately. Like a lot of sport climbing's 20 degrees overhanging, and even that's kind of overhanging if you're climbing a 100-foot route or 30 meters. And even if we're looking at hard bouldering, a lot of hard bouldering is done between, 25 and 35 degrees. I mean, there's a reason my home wall is a 35-degree board. That to me is what a lot of hard boulders that I want to do, that is the angle. It's sick when you find something like Alphane, something like Wet Dream, climbs that are these big, sustained, steep angles. Those are incredible, but they're very rare. Rock just isn't that overhanging in the grand scheme of things. So does this mean we shouldn't climb on steep stuff? No, absolutely not. We should. There's plenty of reason. If you have good pulling strength and you want to keep improving it, steep climbing is great because it's going to put more weight on your arms and that's going to train that well. So people who are very, very strong, 55 degrees, that can be a great angle for pulling around, continuing to get your shoulders and your whole upper body stronger. Also, steep climbs do exist, and Even on sport climbs, there are plenty of times where you're going to do a climb that most of it's 20 degrees overhanging, but it might have a little roof out of it that's the crux. Cool, let's slam a board and train for that. I also think it's important to have a myriad of skills. I want to be good at all styles, and climbing steeper is a different style, has different techniques than climbing on lower angle climbs. There is a lot of value in climbing all across the spectrum. The last thing that I will say about angle is that it's a really good way to change the difficulty of a climb. If you have a climb, you want to do it 45 degrees, and you think, if I can do this, this will mean I am at the level of strength I need for my outdoor project. But if it's just way too hard, man, turn it back to like 40 degrees. Train on it there. You can train on it at 42 degrees. I know, crazy. No one's going to stop you. Some people might stop you, but you're allowed to do that. You can do whatever you want in the name of training. There are no rules. So find the angle that fits you best, even if everyone else says, hey, 40 degrees is the only way. Fine, maybe it's a good way for them. But find what fits you and work from there. Number 98, choosing which board to climb on. So now that we've talked about angle, let's talk about which board. And obviously this is a very privileged point, and the idea that you climb somewhere that has multiple boards to choose from, but that's becoming more common, so I'm leaving it in here. There are a lot of reasons to choose which board you want to climb on. Anything from, hey, here's the one that inspires me. I saw ravioli biceps on Instagram and I want to climb on the moon board because I think that's cool and I want to chase those benchmarks. Amazing, that's fun. If you love the idea of a mirrored board, which I do, TB2 is great, or even the tension board 1. Maybe all of your friends climb on the kilter board together every Wednesday. Cool, you should go climb on it. Climb with them, having sessions with friends and with people who are motivated, who can help push you to be better. Man, that is worth so much. Absolutely do it, even if it's not perfect on paper. There are a lot of reasons to choose different boards. My point here mostly is that you should have a reason for what you're doing. A good example of this that I like is I've got a buddy who's 6'1", good at doing big moves, and he likes open-handed holds. He tried out the kilter board and pretty much immediately was like, this just doesn't fill the gap I need. I know how to do this climbing. Would I get stronger from this? Sure. But with the amount of time he spends training, which is not a ton because he likes climbing outside more, he wanted something that gave him more bang for his buck. So he decided, a tension board fills the gap much better for him than a kilter board. However, I've worked with plenty of people who have super strong hands. They're really good at maybe climbing bunchy and doing more outdoor like small move crawl moves. When they go inside, they hate the kilter board. They don't want to climb on it because the moves are enormous, and especially for short climbers. I think something like the kilter board is pretty great for shorter climbers, especially if you don't crimp on the footholds, because it gets harder by the moves getting bigger. The holds are just generally big. So if your goal is to get better at big moves between decent holds, you can do it on any board, frankly, but the kilter is just going to force feed it to you because that is sort of the mono style of that board. I will say that the biggest mistake I see people make when choosing which commercial board to train on is they pick the board based on the climber they want to be rather than the climber they are. I will talk to people who don't have good crimp strength, and crimps are also really tweaky for them. They have a long history of getting hurt on crimps, but they say, man, I see people who climb on the 2016 moon board and they crimp so hard. There's so many crimps on it. I want to go climb on that. And I would caution against this because it is so crimpy. Every hold is so in cut. It is such a high intensity for someone who is bad at crimps and regularly gets hurt at crimping. This is not step one for you. It'd be sick to get there, but you should find something that meets you where you're at. Maybe you get on the TB2 and you crank it up to 30 degrees. Now we can actually grab some crimps. Or go get on the kilter board. Those holds are baby proof. Like, everything is so soft and squishy whenever you're grabbing them that it's much easier on the fingers. This doesn't feel like the fast track to just knuckling down and hucking around between crimps like Ben Kim, but that's okay. We want the board that is best for you right now. If you're terrible at board climbing, climbing on a kilter will still get your fingers stronger. And maybe that gets you to where you can be, to where now you can climb on other boards. I will also say that if you can show some restraint, the TB2 has an incredible mix of holds and options, so you can climb kilter style or more open-handed on the TB2, and even more open-handed, frankly. There are actual slopers. If you are able to take a step back and say, hey, here's what I need. I'm going to climb on bigger edges, and I'm only going to crimp on a lower angle. Otherwise, I'm going to climb on open-handed holds, because this allows me to train on a board with a lower risk of injury. Let me just say that there are so many more boards than the ones I'm listing now. I'm talking about the more popular ones, and frankly, the ones I've climbed on. There is the Decoy, there is the Woods board, and there are multiple sets of the Moon board. I'm a huge fan of the 2019 set, and I think the 2024 is really good as well, though I haven't spent as much time on it yet. But whatever it is you choose, have a good reason and make sure it's your reason. It's the one that's going to suit you best for who you are right now. Number 99, the board grade paradox. Okay, grades. I've been trying to avoid them for as long as I can, but here we are. Board grades are kind of funny because every board sort of has their own set, and with adjustable boards, grades are crazy. One of the main ways in climbing to tell, are you climbing on something that will make you better, is, does it feel challenging for you? And we have to ask, challenging for what? Challenging for the grade. So if I normally climb V5 in one try, and I go and I find this V5 that takes me 30 tries, this must be working a weakness, right? It has to be. In a lot of situations, I would say that's true, and that's how I tell people to go find their weaknesses. Find the things that the grades just don't make sense to you. You think, I should do this, but I can't. I think a healthy mindset tends to be, it must be hard for me because I am doing something wrong, or it's a weakness for me. The issue is that grades on boards are so different board to board, honestly, and even within board, but we're not going to go into that. But because of this, it makes some boards feel more useful and some feel less useful. So I'm just going to go ahead and name names here. Moon boards, very sandbagged, for sure. Most people I know who climb outside consistently climb 2 to 3 V grades harder outdoors than they do on a moon board, where maybe on the TB2, it's a little bit closer to outdoors, and maybe with a kilter, they climb the exact or they climb harder on the kilter board. And that's a fairly common breakdown. But here's what is so important about this. Just because a V5 on the moon board feels nails hard for you doesn't mean that this is working a weakness and that it is representative of something that you need in your climbing. It could just be that this grade is so far off. This V5 on a moon board might actually be a worse stimulus for you to become better than this V8 on the kilter board, even though they feel the exact same difficulty. Maybe the style of the V8 kilter board actually is what you need. I will regularly hear people talk about, well, the kilter board isn't good for training because the grades are soft, or I think the moon board is better than the tension board because the grades feel so much harder. And they're just numbers assigned by people. Like they're not actually representative of the challenge, unfortunately. The consensus is all over the place on all of the boards. It is a problem, but it's just true. You need to find the things that are appropriate challenges for you. When you're climbing on an individual board, I do think you can use that rule of, this problem feels really hard for the grade. It probably represents something I'm bad at, but with a second we jump between boards, you need to refresh your mindset on what grades mean and challenges mean for that board. Because if we take them all as a whole, we'll always just think that the most sandbag board is the most beneficial board, even though that's not true. If I decided to grade everything on my home wall V2, that doesn't make them all amazing training boulders that are great for getting me better because they're V2s I fall on all the time. No, they're just wrong. Number 100. Amazing. Setting your own boulder problems. Setting your own boulder problems is something that almost everyone used to do for a very long time and has completely dropped off. When I started climbing, boulders didn't get reset very often. So what that meant was every wall was kind of a spray wall. You would climb all of the sets that you could, and then we would all make up our own boulders, and I would have my makeup and I would share it with someone else and they would tell me their variations. that was just normal. I love getting to coach route setters because their literacy for movement is immediately so much higher than everyone else because they think about movement all of the time and they recognize just changing a foothold that's decent to a hold that's a little bit better can completely change the way you do a move. It's unbelievable without changing anything else. It's orientation, it's placement, just a little bit more force that you can put through that foot will change all of the mechanics. Route setters get this. Now, obviously, we can't all be turning wrenches and setting entire walls and getting that experience, but we can get a decent chunk of that by setting our own boulders on these commercial boards. This is especially true for people who have a weakness. If you're bad at heel hooking, try and set some heel hook boulders. Figure out what makes them tick, what doesn't. Like, why does this heel hook boulder work that someone else set? Why is that one good? And why is the heel useful where the one you set, it's just this jug that's floating in space that you can't actually make work? Figure it out. This is your chance to be creative and really explore climbing more. Not to mention, when you set a boulder problem and then you share it with a friend, you get to see how they climb on it. And that completely changes the way you look at things because you may be thinking, I have this perfect sequence and it's going to climb like this. And they go through and they skip all these holds or they do it completely differently. It shows you how you view climbing. I think that setting on the board is one of those things that feels slow, but it is such a great way to understand movement more, to really level up your climbing, and just to have a little deeper experience with board climbing. Number 101 and last one for today, incorporate light sessions into your climbing. Board climbing is very intense, and as an advanced climber, you're pretty strong now, and the way I like to explain it to people is you're strong enough to break yourself. As a beginner climber, when you're only climbing on jugs and you're also so uncoordinated that you just slip off all the time, beginner climbers aren't strong enough to do a ton of damage. If you're on a big handlebar jug, we're not really going to be tweaking our pulleys. Not to say that beginners don't get hurt, they absolutely do. But the stronger and more coordinated you get, the more force you can put through holds, the more high quality your efforts, and just the more strenuous climbing is on your body. So what this means is maybe as a beginner or intermediate climber, you could climb 4, 5, 6 days a week. But now that you're more advanced, you might be thinking, God, I can only climb like 2 board sessions a week, and I feel like I'm beat up if I try and do more. Here's the thing. Climbing is a skill sport. We need to get a sufficient amount of volume to move well. If you're only climbing 2 days a week, that's not a lot of movement. And especially if you're board climbing where you're resting sufficiently through all of your attempts, we're doing very little actual movement. So what I'm a huge fan of is let's incorporate some lighter sessions. Go in and just do skill drills. Climb easier problems. We're not doing a tremendous amount of volume. Don't go in and say, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to climb every boulder in the gym V5 and under 3 times each. Terrible plan. Go in, move well, practice different skills. If you normally close crimp everything, go only climb open hand. This is a great place to shore up weaknesses, and we get to just spend more time on the wall doing the thing you love, rock climbing, and improving our skill in a way that's not always at our top end and beating us up. I truly believe that light sessions and open hand only sessions are some of the most criminally underrated ways to improve at climbing without adding more intensity. All right, y'all, thanks for watching. What did I miss? Are there any tips that you found just absolutely changed the game for you for board climbing that you think more people should know? Man, leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know more things. Also, if you want to see deeper dives into any of these points or any other points around board climbing in general, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time.